The last thing my foster brother said to me before the cops slammed the car door was, "Don't worry, Jenna. I'll take care of everything while you're gone." He wasn't talking about my dog, or my apartment, or my reputation. He was talking about my entire life. My name is Jenna Wallace. I'm 19 years old, and I spent the last year and a half in county jail for a crime I didn't commit. I didn't steal the car. I didn't hotwire it. I didn't even have the keys. But none of that mattered, because the one person I trusted most handed the police everything they needed to make me the perfect scapegoat. His name is Braden Ellis. We met when I was 14, after bouncing through 6 foster homes. He was already living with Mrs. Dorsey, our foster mom, when I showed up. Cocky, charming, and always surrounded by people who thought he was the golden child. And to be fair, he played the part well. Good grades, clean shoes, always offering to mow lawns for the neighbors. Nobody saw what I saw when the doors closed. Manipulation wrapped in a smile. But I didn't see the full scope until it was too late. When Mrs. Dorsey passed away last year, she left a small inheritance and her apartment to me. She told me once that I reminded her of her daughter who had passed away, that she wanted me to have something that was mine. Braden was furious. He played it cool in front of the lawyer, even gave me a hug in the hallway, but I could see it. His jaw clenched, his hands shaking. A week later, he showed up at my door with a pizza and 2 cans of orange soda, said he wanted to celebrate. I didn't think twice. We ate, laughed, talked about the future. Then he asked if I'd give him a ride to pick up a speaker he was buying off Facebook Marketplace. That was the last normal moment I had. When we got to the parking lot, he asked me to wait in the car while he went to grab it. 10 minutes later, I was surrounded by flashing lights and pulled out of the driver's seat at gunpoint. Braden was gone. The car had been reported stolen 2 hours earlier. And when they searched it, they found something much worse than just a mismatched VIN. There were stolen credit cards, cash, and a fake ID, none of it mine. But the keys were in the ignition. I was in the driver's seat. And Braden's phone was suddenly out of service. He didn't show up to testify. He didn't respond to any of my calls or letters. And when I finally got access to a newspaper from jail, I found out he had moved into my apartment, and was dating my ex, Mark. The same Mark who had told me he'd wait. The same Mark who never even visited me once. I can't describe the kind of rage that lives in your chest when you realize you've been erased. Not just forgotten, replaced. He didn't just take my apartment. He took my life. And the world let him. I kept my head down in jail, got my GED, took every work shift they allowed. I never lost hope, not because I believed things would get better, but because I needed something to do with the fire inside me. I didn't have a family, I didn't have friends, but I had time, and I used every second of it planning how to come back stronger. When I got out, I walked back to that apartment building. I knew the security code like the back of my hand, but when I walked up the stairs and looked through the hallway window, I saw him, Braden, in my old hoodie, laughing with Mark like they hadn't just buried me alive. That night, I slept on a bench behind a gas station, and in the morning, I went looking for work. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan. Until I met a man named Raymond Crowley, who offered me a dishwashing job at his BBQ joint after seeing me swipe ketchup packets from the trash. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. That was the first step, but not the last, because 2 weeks later, I found something inside an old receipt book under the counter, something that would change everything. And that's when I realized Braden may have stolen my life, but I was about to steal his future. The receipt book was buried under a stack of faded invoices and old barbecue sauce coupons. It was thick, stained with grease, and half the pages were stuck together. I wouldn't have even noticed it if it hadn't fallen off the shelf when I was sweeping behind the counter. I picked it up, flipped through a few pages, and froze. Tucked between 2 crumpled receipts was a folded check made out to Braden Ellis, signed by Mark D. Wallace, my ex. The same guy who'd ghosted me the second I was in handcuffs. The date on the check? A week before I got arrested. The memo line? for cleaning up the mess. I sat on the floor behind the counter, my heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. I read the name 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Same handwriting, same account number, same smirk I remembered from Mark's signature. That's when it hit me. Mark paid Braden, not just to move in, not just to take care of things, but to set me up. I stared at the check for a long time. My fingers felt numb. I wanted to scream, to rip it in half, to run down the street and bang on every door until someone told me how this could possibly be real. But I didn't. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the inner pocket of my work apron. And then I went back to washing dishes, because I wasn't going to waste this. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid on the old cot in the storage room behind the restaurant, listening to the freezer hum and the wind tap at the window. I played everything back in my head, every conversation, every moment I'd brushed off as weird, every smile that felt just a little too forced. I remembered the time Braden had borrowed my car, just for the afternoon, and came back hours late. I remembered how Mark always asked if I locked the apartment door at night, like he was checking for something. I remembered how, when the cops pulled me out of the stolen car, they already knew my name. It wasn't random. They planned it. Together. And I was disposable. The next morning, I showed the check to Raymond, the owner of the BBQ joint. I didn't mean to. I just broke down in the middle of prepping brisket, and the whole story came tumbling out. He didn't say much. Just listened, nodding every so often, like he already knew the world could be that cruel. When I finished, he reached into the drawer beside the register and pulled out an old envelope. "Got something for you," he said. "It's not much, but I've been meaning to give it to someone who deserved it." Inside was a battered library card and a prepaid phone with internet access. On the back of the envelope, in his handwriting, were 3 words: "Don't stop learning." That was the moment everything shifted. Every night after work, I'd walk 6 blocks to the public library and read everything I could get my hands on. Accounting, personal finance, legal guides for ex-convicts. I even found an online business forum that offered free webinars for people starting from scratch. Most of it was over my head at first, but I didn't care. I wrote things down. I Googled every word I didn't understand. I made flashcards out of napkins and old receipts. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was studying. And the more I studied, the more I realized Braden was sloppy. He had transferred the apartment deed into his name. But the notary who stamped the paperwork? She'd lost her license 2 years ago. The signature on the transfer? It didn't match my legal documents. He'd forged it, and he hadn't even done a good job. But that wasn't the biggest discovery. The biggest one came when I checked a local real estate filing and saw that Braden had recently used the apartment as collateral for a loan from a private lender with a history of shady deals, which meant one thing: if he missed a single payment, the apartment wouldn't belong to either of us. It would go to the bank, unless someone got to it first. That's when I made a decision. If Braden was willing to steal everything I had, then I was willing to take back everything he thought was his. But first, I needed to find out exactly how much debt he was drowning in. And I knew exactly where to start. The deeper I dug into Braden's finances, the more it felt like unraveling a live wire. Every document, every email, every forged signature exposed just how reckless he'd become, and how easy it would be to destroy him. It started with a public database. I searched the apartment address and found a recent lien filed under his name. The lender? A private outfit out of Houston, known for targeting desperate borrowers, the kind who'd sign away their soul just to stay afloat. The loan wasn't small either, $42,000. Secured directly against the apartment. My apartment. If he missed even one payment, the lender had legal rights to seize the property. I called their office pretending to be a curious buyer. Asked what would happen if the borrower defaulted. The woman on the phone was cold, blunt. Foreclosure proceedings start after 60 days late. He's already 43 days in. My hands were shaking when I hung up, Not from fear, from adrenaline. He was slipping, fast. But here's the thing about people like Braden. They don't go down without a show. And I knew if I wanted to bring him down, I'd need more than debt and forged paperwork. I needed something personal, something that would expose him completely. So I went to the one place I swore I'd never return to, Mark's condo. He was still working at the same marketing firm, still driving the same black Honda. I waited until I knew he'd be out and slipped through the side gate. He always hid the spare key in the fake rock next to the hose. Some things never change. Inside, it smelled like expensive candles and cheap betrayal. I didn't waste time. Went straight for the office. Braden had lived there for months before moving into the apartment, and something told me he hadn't cleaned up after himself. Second drawer of the desk, behind a stack of tax returns, a black flash drive. No label, no password. Just plugged in and opened instantly. At first, it looked like nothing, just a few folders. But when I opened the one marked Utilities, my stomach dropped. There were photos, dozens of them, IDs, signatures, contracts, all doctored. Some with Braden's face, some with mine. A full collection of forged documents he'd used to build his fake identity. And mine. He wasn't just pretending to own my apartment. He was using my name to open accounts, dodge taxes, and cover his trail. He'd been laundering money under my identity. If I hadn't found that flash drive, I could have been arrested again. This time for something I didn't even know existed. I backed everything up. Twice. Once on a hidden folder in my new phone. Once printed and sealed in an envelope I left with Raymond, just in case anything ever happened to me. Because at this point, I didn't trust anyone. The next morning, I booked a meeting with a small business lawyer under my new business alias. I laid out everything: timelines, forged signatures, the flash drive, even the check Mark wrote. The woman didn't blink once, just kept writing. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You've got enough to put him away for 5 years minimum and reclaim the apartment." But that wasn't enough. I didn't want Braden in jail, not yet. I wanted him terrified. So I crafted a plan, simple, precise, cruel in the way only poetic justice can be. I sent him an anonymous envelope, no return address, no threats, just a copy of the forged notary stamp, one of the fake leases he created, and a single sentence typed at the bottom: "You missed your second payment. Tick-tock." No signature, just silence. Within 24 hours, he posted on Facebook, begging for a private loan opportunity. Within 48, he was asking friends for short-term cash. I watched the panic grow online like a fire he couldn't contain. And just when I thought it couldn't get better, it did. Raymond walked into the back of the restaurant one afternoon, holding a crumpled business journal in his hand. "You might want to see this," he said. It was a foreclosure listing. The apartment. My apartment. Going up for public auction. In 6 days. But the listing didn't shock me. What did was who else was listed as a partial owner. Not Braden, not Mark. Me. Somewhere, somehow. Braden had slipped up. My name was still tied to the title, which meant I had legal standing to bid. And suddenly, after everything he stole, everything he ruined, I was holding the key to take it all back. If you didn't see that twist coming, you're not alone. Drop a 2 in the comments if you're ready to see how I used his own lies to destroy him. The day of the auction felt like the air had teeth. Sharp, cold, electric. I arrived early, just after 8 a.m., wearing a blazer I bought for $7 at a thrift store. I kept my hair tied back, glasses on, voice steady. No emotion, no nerves, just paperwork. Everything legal, everything real. The lawyer I'd met with had drawn up the necessary documents. Braden's screw-up had left my name partially tied to the apartment's title through an old trust Mrs. Dorsey set up. He must have missed it when he forged the deed. That mistake was about to cost him everything. The auction was held outside the courthouse under a white canopy, the kind used for bake sales or flu shots. A crowd of around 20 people milled about, real estate investors, retirees, a few obvious flippers scribbling numbers on their clipboards. Nobody looked twice at me. And then, 20 minutes in, I saw him. Braden, wearing the same fake designer sunglasses he used to flash at parties, hair perfectly styled, but the cracks were showing. His jaw twitched, shirt wrinkled. He kept checking his phone like a man waiting for news he already knew would be bad. I slipped further back into the crowd and handed my bidder number to Raymond, who stood beside me like the silent force of a storm. He was the one who raised the paddle each time the number jumped. Braden started bidding early. Too early. He was panicking, pushing the price higher with every raise. The auctioneer barely had time to speak before another bid came out of his mouth. He had no idea he was bidding against me. Raymond kept his face calm, unreadable, but my blood was screaming. Each time Braden shouted out another number, I felt the heat rise in my chest. He was clawing for a life he didn't deserve, my life, with the desperation of someone who finally realized the floor beneath them was gone. And then, just like that, the final number landed. Sold. To bidder 192. To me. Braden stared, confused, eyes darting, like he was trying to figure out who the hell had just ripped his world out from under him. I didn't flinch, I didn't gloat. I walked up to the courthouse table, signed the ownership documents, and quietly said, "Print 2 copies. One for me, one I plan to show him." He stormed up the moment I stepped away. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped, sweat breaking through his perfect hairline. I took off my glasses. It took him 3 seconds to realize. 3 seconds for his lips to part, his shoulders to fall, and his face to drain like a sink unplugged. "J. Jenna?" I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I simply handed him the signed deed, flipped to the page with my name, and let it sit there like a weight he couldn't lift. "You can't do this," he hissed. "Oh," I said softly, "but I already did." He lunged forward, grabbing my wrist, but Raymond was there in an instant. Between us, calm but firm. Braden backed off. His face twisted into something I'd never seen before. Fear, not arrogance, not defiance. Just raw, quiet panic. But it wasn't over. That afternoon, I emailed the lender holding his debt. Let them know the foreclosure had been resolved. The unit sold. They'd be made whole. Then I did something he never saw coming. I forwarded a complete copy of his forged documents, tax evasion history, and identity fraud file, complete with the flash drive evidence, to a federal investigator who specialized in white-collar crime. How? Because I'd reached out 2 weeks earlier. Because I'd recorded our encounter at the auction. Because everything I'd done was by the book. I didn't want just revenge. I wanted justice. And it came faster than I expected. 3 days later, Braden was arrested outside of a Planet Smoothie. I watched the body cam footage online. He dropped his phone, begged the officer not to cuff him in public, and sobbed the second they said the word fraud. But that's not the twist. The twist? Mark turned him in. Apparently, when Braden panicked after the auction, he ran to Mark begging for help, threatened to expose Mark's own part in framing me. In response, Mark sent everything to the authorities to save his own skin. I didn't even have to lift that part of the plan. They destroyed each other. And me? I owned the apartment. I had a clean record. I had a name that couldn't be erased anymore. The apartment looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the sunlight, or maybe it was because, for the first time in years, I was standing in it as the owner. The old couch was still there, same stains, same broken leg I used to prop up with a dictionary. But the silence was different now. It didn't echo with shame or anger. It felt clean. Empty, yes, but ready. I spent the next few weeks tearing everything down, not just furniture, memories. I repainted the walls myself, took down every old photo Braden had put up of him and Mark, smiling like they hadn't gutted me. I ripped up the cheap carpet and laid new flooring, plank by plank. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. Mine. And then, I did what I'd been dreaming about since the day they locked me in that cell. I turned the apartment into a place for girls like me. Girls who got dropped by the system. Girls who had nowhere to go when the group homes shut down. Girls who didn't need pity. They needed safety. A second shot. A bed. A locked door they controlled. I called it the Wallace Unit. Not after me, but after the woman who gave me her name. Mrs. Dorsey. Raymond helped with everything. He bought a new fridge, stocked it with groceries, even built 2 bunk beds with his own hands. "No girl should sleep on a floor," he said. "Not in your house." The first night, we had one girl. Her name was Talia, 16, quiet. She'd been couch hopping for months, too scared to go back to her last foster home. She didn't speak much, just held the cup of cocoa I gave her, like it might disappear if she blinked. She stared at the walls, at the clean sheets, at me. "Is this really mine?" she asked. "No," I said, "but it's yours tonight, and tomorrow, and for as long as you need it." She cried when I said that. Not loud, just enough for me to see she wasn't used to being believed. That's when I knew. This was the ending I wanted. Not a headline, not even revenge, but this room, this safety, this silence that didn't hurt. Braden, on the other hand, didn't get silence. He got noise. The media picked up the case once charges were filed. Local man arrested for identity fraud, forgery, tax evasion. His photo was everywhere, handcuffed in front of a smoothie shop, crying like a toddler. Employers dropped him. Friends distanced themselves. Mark disappeared off social media completely. But the worst part? Braden had to watch me rebuild. He had to watch the girl he buried come back from the grave, stronger than he ever imagined. He sent me a letter from county jail. Handwritten, begging for forgiveness, blaming the pressure, the money, the confusion. I didn't respond. Instead, I mailed back a photo. It was taken in the new living room. Me, Talia, 2 more girls, all of us laughing, real and loud, a string of lights across the ceiling, fresh paint on the walls, a sign that read, "You can't erase me." No note, no return address, just that photo, because that's all he ever needed to see. I didn't get justice from a judge. I didn't get closure from a courtroom. I got it the day a teenage girl said, "Thank you just for being safe." Braden built a life off of lies. I built one off of ashes. And if you ask me which one lasts longer, you already know the answer. If this story hit you the way it hit me living it, drop a 2 in the comments. Let me know you're still here, still listening. And if you want more stories like this, you know what to do. Subscribe. Because the next one might just leave you speechless.